Welcome back to another episode of Inspired Content, starting off a new month with the first part of this book, which is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I figured it was about time I read it, so I'll give it a look through and see what ideas it inspired, and see you on the other side. Walden. I guess I'm gonna have to break this into two-parter because I'm sort of mixed on this. This is 250 pages of text that, to be perfectly honest, I'm halfway through at this point. And I like it, but it's also insanely frustrating to try to read through. It's the sort of thing you don't read through, you read. It's a meandering conversation. It's, in its own way, it's a peaceful solitude along a lake with one's own thoughts. And therefore, it's not going to get to the point, because the point is being there with the thoughts. And maybe it's, partly the time frame it was written in. But, the dude wrote 20 pages about the ponds. It's 20 pages about how clear the water is, what type of fish live in it, the shape of its shores, how deeply you could see into it, and it's just 20 pages of that. There are some really good pearls of wisdom and beauty in this, but I would rate this probably a 5.7 out of a 7.1. It's not bad. It's certainly not one of my favorites, but it is rich with visuals and appreciation and sort of meditations. I think the other thing that gets me about it is, for as much as he talks about how living the simple life and the conceit we have in modern culture with the complexities and the things we labor towards as if they are the great thing, and yet they eat away and while away our hours of existence. His writing style is the same thing he rails against. There is a richness and beauty in the simplicity which he does not use in any of his writing. There is nothing simple about what he's saying. Whole paragraphs could be one sentence. A modern editor could trim that down. I don't think that would ever make it across a modern editor's desk. But it is full of wonderfully visual, and it's a love letter to nature, and it's visually and intellectually stimulating on some levels. But what I tend to do here is I like to look at it for ideas, and so, like I said, this is for the first half of it. I'm going to hit you with the 6 that I pulled from the first half, because there's plenty more to go with. He talks about a train that travels through the area as a fiery steed, and the visuals of this sort of fire-powered, steam-powered, mechanical horse roaring through a forest, both wild and yet mechanical and industrial. And I like that sort of idea. I think it would make a really cool painting, but it could also be the foundations of an interesting story or setting. At one point he's talking about in several pages he's talking about birds that he hears around the lake, and the different ones, and he equates several of them, like the owls, to morning spirits bemoaning that they exist and that they were ever born. And I got to thinking, this is sort of very kind of, it'd be kind of an interesting new spin on the idea of like Dante's Inferno, where you can have the rings of hell where different people, or rings of Hades, where different people are stuck to different fates. And it'd be interesting to do something similar in maybe a fantasy setting where the forest is the pit, and the people who have faced different fates and been judged differently find themselves transformed into the birds of those regions within the forest. And it's an interesting kind of play on the idea. I think it would be something I might have to dabble with further to get a narrative of like a person forced to visit this enchanted forest and those who are damned within it, and why they're damned that way. At one point he's talking about the glassy surface of the lake and fishing in the lake and casting his line out into a perfect reflection of the night sky, and how he thinks about, could he cast his line into the sky as easily and catch things from the sky. And I like the idea of perhaps this magician, or maybe it's a setting where such a thing is possible, where casting a line into the sky will catch creatures that are unusual. Along those same lines, he's talking about, at a certain point, his boat being on the crystal clear lakes, and because the water is so clear you don't see it at first, and you can see 30 feet below your boat, there's a real sense that the boat is adrift in the air. And I got this sort of image of the possibility of a magic lake where you row out to the center, and as clear as it is in the center, there's a point where you no longer know if you're on the water or in the air. And once you're in the air, drifting out above the land on your boat. It'd be a short story or a painting, especially I think as a painting that would be amazing to see. He does a lot of talking, sort of a pseudo-mythological attribution of spirits within the land, about all the features of the land, but he talks about the nymphs of the pond on a couple occasions in passing. But later he's talking about how clear the water is, and when he's talking about the clarity of the water, he says you can look down and 30 or 40 feet below you will be these perfect circles of small white stones on a barren sandy bottom, that there's a part of me just says like, this is like the standing, the stone circles in Ireland or Celtic regions, or like some of the petroglyphs in South America. And it has me thinking of these circles as if, some of the fish or the creatures that swim in the lower, darker regions of the lake crossed into these circles. They take the form of the nymphs, or perhaps the circles are a means of exchange, where you would drop a gift into the circle, and the next day you'd come back to the same circle and it would be empty, and upon returning to the cabin you find something left for you. And so you have this exchange going on with these mythical creatures that live within the lake. And one more thing about the lake, which he expounded for 20 pages, was talking about a story that he was told of an iron trunk that rests at the center of the lake. And it's down there at the bottom, but it sometimes floats to the surface and comes towards the edge. And you can see it, and you can notice it. It's as you reach towards it that it retreats back into the lake. And I think that sort of taunting quest for the hidden treasure within the lake as a narrative device. I think that's a story that needs more to it to be told further, explored, and played with. But yeah, those are the 6 ideas I got for the first half of doing Walden. I will probably go back and do a second half. I will probably not do it as next week's writing. I may do it as an addendum to this week. But yeah, next week is a video, so I will see you for that. Take care.